Yo guys, what's up? My name is Judge Prime, the ITK, here again with another video. Now today we are talking about Run the Jewels and the third installment of their Run the Jewels mixtape slash album series, Run the Jewels 3. Now, Run the Jewels is a duo that's made up of rapper Killer Mike and LP, who's a rapper and also a producer. In fact, he handles a large amount of the production on their projects. And I have to say, I'm a fan of Killer Mike as a rapper and as a person in general. During the election season, I was a huge and still am a huge fan of Bernie Sanders. His involvement in that campaign was very inspiring for me. It showed a lot of people that not all rappers just talk about, the politics and, how the political system and the government affects people, but he was actually out there fighting for a politician who, in his eye, would right a lot of the wrongs in terms of, institutional racism and just inequality in America. So let's get back to this album. This album is very, very politically charged. You're hearing a lot of raps and songs about, socio-political and socio-economic issues, inequality. You're also getting, a little bit of, nastiness and sensual or sexual elements here and there. You're getting, the standard bragginess that comes with hip hop. While it is heavily politically charged, it isn't sanctimonious. There wasn't a moment on this where I, in my personal opinion, felt like either Killer Mike or LP were preaching to me. Rather, it just felt like, they were giving their own perspective, their own experiences, and, just trying to create awareness for whatever things or whatever issues they felt needed awareness created on. I love albums like this. I love albums that have a lot of lyrical and sonical elements that you can really dig deep and, talk about. As someone who reviews music, I think it's important for you to go into the music and really give a deep analysis. And, Run the Jewels helped me here by giving me something very extensive to analyze. I don't think I'll be able to go through everything. And I know at the end of the video, when I'm editing this, I'll have to cut out some things, and I'll forget some things and I'll hit myself in the head because I forgot them. But let's try and get through what I observed, what I enjoyed, and just talk about the album. So the album opens with the track Down, which features an artist by the name of Joy. I think this is a very smooth introduction. It basically feels like, a kind of prayer, an introductory prayer. Basically, you're having Killer Mike on here saying, he prays he doesn't have to go back to the life he was living, basically living in the trap, hoping and praying that he doesn't have to go back to dealing drugs. I think it's a great introduction, I have to say. The production on here is banging, it's ear-grabbing, it's charismatic, the flow is charismatic. Everything about this just makes you want to listen to it, in my personal opinion. At least I just wanted to listen to it. I think the album starts off with very ear-grabbing production, something that's not too deep in the beginning, and then gradually progresses into more dense and, charged topics. I have to say that Killer Mike and LP have phenomenal chemistry throughout the course of this album. I think the flow by both of these artists is great, though I prefer Killer Mike on this project. I think the beats are amazing. I think, the lyrics are very dense and descriptive. They give you this kind of illustrative vibe. You're able to picture yourself in the various scenarios that are painted throughout this album. From the track Hey Kids, you get this more rebellious tone from this project. You're getting, basically on this track, it's a rebellion theme or rebellion song. The word Bumaye comes from Lingala, which is a Congolese language, or the language of the Congo, which basically means kill him. Basically, I think the him is a reference to corporations and the government, which is basically, trying to screw over everybody. I think talking about, fighting the government, Killer Mike has a very interesting philosophy, in my opinion. While he's someone who calls himself a capitalist, he's also a fan of, more socialist programs. And in fact, obviously, he supported Bernie Sanders, who's a socialist politician. And in fact, I think he's quoted somewhere saying, black communities cannot fight American capitalism with capitalism. They need to fight it with socialism. And also looking at some of the things he says on this project, you would think that he's more for anarchy. So I think he's a nice blend between, all these different kinds of political ideologies. The track Don't Get Captured is a very eerie, dark, and a little bit of a scary track. Basically on this track, Killer Mike is lamenting Basically on this track, Killer Mike is lamenting on, certain people's indifference towards inequality and injustice that goes on. He references, Chicago and the gun killings that go on there and how people are just indifferent to it because, it doesn't really affect them until, a peasant comes into your window with a gun. And then he talks about, how people buy all these things that they don't need just for the sake of it. He also touches on gentrification, how, black communities are being forced out, but then, sort of corrects himself or corrects the speaker by saying, this isn't only a black issue. In fact, it's not a racial issue because you have white communities that are being victims of gentrification. LP comes on and then talks more about, this kind of system or this path in life that a lot of people are forced into. Basically go to work, get a house, and then get a coffin. That this system is very conducive and profitable for the establishment. Throughout this album, I'll say as well, there's a lovely progression between the tracks. The transitioning is very smooth and seamless. You basically think you're listening to one long story at the end of the day. That's one thing I love about albums. A lot of times you see me, I complain that the album had no theme. It's very easy to tell what the theme of this album is. The next track, Thieves, has a very interesting intro and a very interesting message. I'm reading an excerpt from the intro. It basically says, walk into this room at your own risk. It leads to the future, not a future that will, but might be. Not a new world, but an extension of the old one. So I think this is very interesting, and it's basically a conversation with a ghost. And while we talk about a new world, basically it's not a new world. If we don't solve the problems that we have currently, we will end up facing a larger problem because, whatever we've tried to suppress now will eventually bubble up. So on this track, you have Killer Mike painting a dystopian picture, basically with rioting, burning and looting, people screaming at police. And basically he says, a lot of people don't understand why he's angry, but can share that emotion. But at the end of the day, you know that you can always burn down the system. I think this is a reference to current, tension that goes on in the United States, with a lot of people not fully understanding where this tension is coming from and asking, why this tension arises, and a lot of people feeling, left behind by the system. But like he says, you can always burn down the system. LP also talks about the house. I think the house is a reference to America and how it does so much injustice, and eventually that injustice has to catch up with it, and you have to, atone for whatever you've done. I think this is a very powerful track. I think it paints a very vivid image of what could happen if, injustice is not coiled, not just in America, but around the world. It then closes, with an excerpt from a speech by Martin Luther King, basically saying, riots do not develop out of thin air. Conditions exist which must be condemned as vigorously as we condemn the riot. So I think that's another very powerful message. As much as we hate the riots and we condemn the riots, we also need to take a step back and look at the conditions that have caused these riots instead of just, outright, saying these riots are bad. Of course, these riots are bad, but examine the causal issues of these, riots. I think that's another good message. I think that's a message a lot of people need to take in mind. This album is very, very loaded. I highly recommend it to anyone who even has the slightest inclination on political issues, or even wants to understand better, the current political climate in America. It's a good album to start with, to be honest. Another track, Thursday in the Danger Room, basically on this track, Killer Mike and, LP explore life and death. They talk about experiences with friends that they've had, LP talks about, a friend that he had who didn't have very long to live, and how he had to struggle to cope through that, and all the coping mechanisms that you go through. Whatever word is spoken to you already feels like it's in the past. And then, Killer Mike also talks about a friend that he lost, with street violence, having to console and comfort the partner that was left behind, and how everything was taken away from her after the loss of her significant other, Killer Mike's friend. Also talking about having some words for the killer. Even though he wasn't captured, he knows that he's listening, and he hopes that he's atoned for his sins and moved away from that life, because he wouldn't want the killer's, mother to face the same kind of pain that his friend's family is currently facing. So overall, 14 tracks, 14 loaded tracks, beautiful composition, beautiful production, great lyrics, great meaning. I really do love this album. Already one of my favorite albums. And it's a shame that I didn't review it earlier, like I said, but I'm reviewing it now, and I really did enjoy listening to this album over and over, and it's an album I'll definitely be going back to listen to over and over again. Like I said, it delivers a powerful message without being sanctimonious. The beats are very charismatic, ear-grabbing. They're not boring. I did not listen to this and ever feel bored listening to this project. It's a great project, and I highly recommend it to you if you are a fan of lyrical hip-hop, if you're a fan of, politically charged music, if you want to understand, the political atmosphere in America. This is definitely an album to listen to. I really love this album, and it's a 10 out of 10 for me on this project. And yeah, that's all I have for this video. Please do go out and check this album out. It's a great album. And check out their whole entire discography, Run the Jewels. And that's all I have for this review. If you enjoyed this video, please do not hesitate to give it a like. If you're new around here, why not click subscribe? Follow me on social media. Check out some other videos on the side. And I'll see you in the next one. Have a blessed day and goodbye.